Hello everyone, this is Mr. O'Brien, and welcome to the video quiz presentation on the settlement of the Chesapeake, otherwise known as the Jamestown colony. At times I will be reading from the notes beneath each PowerPoint slide. At times I will be ad-libbing, so be sure to follow along, and be sure to take the quiz that will quickly follow the video. So let's go. In the 16th century, England was a second-rate power. It was weakened by internal divisions, especially those between Catholics and Protestants. Queen Elizabeth I, who ruled from 1558 to 1603, finally secured the power of the Anglican Church and successfully defended England from its Catholic enemies on the continent, notably the Spanish, whose attempt in 1588 to invade by a massive armada, the Spanish Armada, was repulsed by Queen Elizabeth. Not personally, but she was the queen when it happened. So well into the 1600s, the English also attempted to subdue Ireland and its Catholic population, in part through military conquest and colonization. The English expelled Irish Catholics from land to make room for Protestant settlements called plantations. The cultural practices and ideas that defined England's colonization of Ireland shaped its conquest of North America. In other words, many of the practices of conquest and suppression of other peoples, they learned how to do that in their submission of Ireland. Only under Queen Elizabeth's reign did the English look to North America. Remember, they were latecomers to the game. That is, to, quote, save the natives from Catholic influence and to absorb the surplus English population, most notably the poor and unemployed. So England sort of viewed colonization as a way to help their population problem. Those who were in debt, those who were criminals, were often encouraged to or sent off to the New World. So unlike the Spanish, English colonists did not want to rule over or assimilate the Indians they found. They wanted the Indians' land. Moving on. The first permanent English settlement in the New World was the Jamestown colony, founded in 1607 by the private Virginia Company. At first, the colony was intended as a means to discover gold or other precious minerals. It was plagued by internal divisions, a high death rate, and few supplies from England. While colonists' hopes for quick riches were soon dashed, few had any experience with agriculture, leading to starvation, which, when compounded by disease and illness, led to a high death rate. Few initial settlers survived the first year, and only military discipline imposed by a former soldier, John Smith, saved the colony. So, of the first shipment there that came to Jamestown, all of them were men. Most of them were either working class, in debt, or criminals, or they were gentlemen not used to hard labor, but they were there to find gold. Their survival instincts were not all that admirable. So to become viable and to attract settlers, the Virginia Company stopped looking for gold, began to grow its own food, to grow and trade, and created an elected representative assembly. The company awarded land to those who paid their own or others' passage, and issued a charter of grants and liberties, which included a House of Burgesses, kind of a legislature, a lawmaking body, the first elected assembly in colonial America, in Jamestown, Virginia, though only landowners could vote. All right, so it's important to remember that this was the first permanent English settlement in the New World, Jamestown, Virginia. Be sure to remember that it's not the Pilgrims. So the arrival in 1619 of the first 20 Africans or blacks in Virginia marked, along with the meeting of the House of Burgesses that year, the joined development of freedom and slavery in English America. Remember, contradiction. Humans are messy. All right, so let's move on. All right, so the charter of the Virginia Company, meaning the charter that the Virginia Company was granted by the Crown in England, to have a colony in Virginia in the New World. It guaranteed to colonists the same rights as Englishmen as if they had stayed in England. So that's why once we get closer to the Revolutionary War, you will hear them saying, you are violating my rights as natural-born Englishmen. This provision was incorporated into future colonist documents, and colonists felt that even in the Americas, they had the rights of Englishmen. All right, England plants the Jamestown seedling. Late 1606, the Virginia Company sends out 3 ships. Spring 1607, they land at the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay. May 24th, 1607. So again, we're going back to the beginning a little bit here. About 100 colonists, all men, they land at Jamestown along the banks of the James River. So this is kind of reviewing what I read on that first slide. All right, about 100 colonists, all men, at Jamestown along the banks of the James River. They chose this area because it was easily defended, but it was swarming with disease-causing mosquitoes. By the way, the name of the three ships, as you see on the notes underneath your slide, are the Susan Constant, the Godspeed, and the Discovery. Feel free to forget that. I will never ask that. Now, if you look at Jamestown, where it was located, you will notice it's kind of like an elbow there. The land juts out. And that's part of the reason why it was so available to the settlers. Powhatan, or at least that's what we called him, Powhatan, didn't want the land. He knew what it meant to live there. In the summer, it was disease infested, and they wondered why so many people were dying. All right. So when they got there, Powhatan didn't mind them being there. He didn't want that land. He looked at them as, maybe I could use them to help gain influence and power over my rival tribes, over rival Indians. So it's important to remember that the settlers settled at the elbow of the James River. So the water would kind of collect in the summer, and malaria would just be given to the settlers. All right, so this is a computer-generated image of what Jamestown may have looked like. Feel free to enjoy. All right, this is a real image of what the Jamestown settlement probably looked like. All right, the Jamestown Nightmare. 1606 to 1607, 40 people died on the voyage to the New World, en route to the New World. 1609, another ship from England lost its leaders and supplies in a shipwreck off of Bermuda. Settlers died by the dozens. The gentlemen, the elite colonists, were unable to fend for themselves. Even though there was a lot of animals, game in forests, and fish in the river, it was uncaught, it was uneaten. They assumed the natives would help. So they built a fort, they didn't plant crops, they were constantly in debt because more and more shipments of supplies that were coming from England, and those supplies were being financed from the investors back in England who were expecting a profit. They stole supplies from the common store within their settlement for their own consumption or trade with natives, so for personal profit. Now we get to Captain John Smith, the right man for the job, question mark, question mark. All right. He's quoted as saying in 1607 that God so changed the hearts of the savages, which we know as the Indians, that they brought such plenty of their fruits and provisions. So he thanked God, he credited God for how nice they were being. Now, he considered this dependency on the natives to be undesirable. They were severely outnumbered, and the local natives were part of a pretty large confederacy, the Powhatan's Confederacy, or at least Powhatan was his title. It's like calling Queen Elizabeth Queen, like that was her name. That's kind of what we did. Anyway, he was granted complete authority over the colony in 1608. He's famous for drawing a map of Virginia that was published in 1624. And, like a good Englishman, he felt superior to the natives, yet he learned plenty from them. Nice little contradiction there. So, he basically divided the settlers into groups to work. Basically, if you didn't work, you didn't eat. And his hard rule is credited with saving the settlement. He also began to evacuate Jamestown in the summer, noticing that's when people became diseased, and the death rate decreased. Moving on. Now let's get to Pocahontas, of Disney fame, Pocahontas. You see on the left-hand side, which is depicted in the Disney movie, Pocahontas saving John Smith, and you see a well-known 1616 engraving of Pocahontas. Now, Native Americans ruled by Powhatan already lived in the area of Virginia, colonized by the Jamestown settlers. At first, the English, dependent on the Indians for food, tried to maintain friendly relations. When John Smith was captured by the Indians, Powhatan's daughter Pocahontas, probably playing out her role in an elaborate ceremony, intervened to save Smith from execution. So in other words, his life was never really in danger. Most likely, Powhatan, Pocahontas' father, was demonstrating his superiority to the settlers, the fact that he had the upper hand, by mimicking the fact that he was in danger. And also, unlike the Disney movie, there was no love interest between Pocahontas and John Smith. As I may have already said to you in class, she was 12 when they met, and he was much older. It's a little icky. So there was no love interest between the two. She married an Englishman later on, and they were more contemporaries. They were more the same age. All right, moving. Okay, so Pocahontas gradually became an intermediary, kind of a liaison, between the Jamestown colony and Powhatan's people. All right, so this is basically a map that just shows you the settlement from England from 1610 to 1660. You can see 25,000 went to New England, 50,000 went to the Virginia colony, Chesapeake, 4,000 down to Bermuda, and 110,000 down to the West Indies. Now, once again, to point at New England, as you will learn, the Pilgrims came first, and quickly thereafter, there was kind of a second great migration of Puritans. But that's for the next video presentation.